Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Father Son Packers podcast, your source for Packers news, notes, and analysis. My name is Tommy, and I'm one of your hosts, and I'm joined, as always, by my co-host, my dad, Matt. Dad, how you doing?
Okay, this time for sure. Now that we finished talking about fantasy football, California accents, and whether or not there is, which one of us has one or not.
One or two more takes of this, and we might actually get to where the Packers injury report is out. So, if we just keep flubbing this, we might get more information.
We'll give you this will be like a live. Eventually, it's going to be a live preview just before
like 10 minutes. I was going to say 10 minutes before game time, exactly. But anyway, like my dad said, we are here to preview the Packers' upcoming game against the Texans. Packers-Texans, Love versus Stroud should be a very good game. We're going to give you all the details for that game coming up. Very exciting game. But before we do, just wanted to pitch a couple of things. If you like what you hear here today, subscribe. We would really appreciate it, whether that's on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, wherever you find podcasts. Subscribe on all of them. We would really appreciate that. Leave a comment, leave a review. That would help us out a lot. We'd really appreciate it. And then if you like us even more, follow us on Twitter at FatherSonPacker. We tweet out whenever we have new episodes out. We also keep you up to date on all the latest Packers news, whether that's roster moves, injury reports, et cetera, et cetera. We also tweet out, content from other Packers content creators that we enjoy, because the Packers content space is just so ripe with great people doing great things out there that, you should really just check out all of it. It's really awesome. But Dad, let's start talking about this game because it is a great one. But before we do have a couple of pieces of news to touch on. And the first one is that the Packers have made a change at kicker. And if you are following the Packers in any capacity, you probably have heard about this. But the Packers have released kicker Braden Narveson. I don't think that comes as a whole lot of a surprise to many people. He had really struggled making kicks that you just need to make in the league. Hopefully he can, catch on somewhere else and have a long career and kind of bounce back. We've seen lots of kickers over the years struggle their rookie years and then, go on to have successful careers. But it just was not working out here. And I think that was something we talked about in the breakdown of the Cardinals game, was that these kicks have already cost you 2 games and they were going to cost you more in the future. And it did kind of seem like, let's start with the moving on from Narveson part, Dad. And it did seem like it was kind of time, right?
Yeah, the amount that he was performing below the next worst kicker was huge.
Yeah.
He was, and the kicks were all under 40. I mean, sorry, under 50, and including one under 40.
Yeah, exactly.
So
it just
maybe
wasn't...
a lot of kickers seem to, excel in their second stint somewhere rather than first.
Yeah, there's a long list of players who have, started out their career. Daniel Carlson was with the Vikings and then just couldn't cut it there, and then went to the Raiders, one of the better kickers in the league. You see guys like Younghoe Koo for the Falcons really struggled with the Chargers initially, then made his way over to the Falcons, is now one of the best kickers in the league. A lot of these guys, if they can get a second chance, they can usually, salvage a career out of it or even become a very good kicker. But so the Packers have moved on from Braden Narveson, which takes us to the conversation about who they chose to replace him. And that is Brandon McManus, a veteran kicker. And the main conversation around him is he has some off-the-field issues, specifically stemming from a lawsuit regarding sexual misconduct, sexual assault on a team flight. And so we're just going to go through some of the information surrounding that because I think it is important to be informed. And I think it's important to be specific about allegations like this because a lot of times people use, language to couch these things or make them seem less impactful than they really are when they are serious accusations. So just as a timeline, he was released this past offseason by the Washington Commanders after some sexual assault allegations, specifically, according to Stephen Wino of the Associated Press in an article published on May 28th of 2024. 2 women have filed, this is a quote from the article, 2 women have filed a civil lawsuit in Florida accusing NFL kicker Brandon McManus of sexually assaulting them while they worked as flight attendants on the Jacksonville Jaguars transatlantic trip to London last year. The women, identified as Jane Doe 1 and Jane Doe 2, allege in court documents that McManus tried to kiss one of them and grinded and rubbed up against both of them while they were trying to perform their work responsibilities during the September 28th flight. So that was the first report of this incident. As I mentioned, the Commanders ended up releasing him after these allegations. Following that up, about a month later, Michael Duraco of ESPN in an article published on September 30th, a few months later, this article was published. This was about the findings of the NFL's investigation into this. The NFL interviewed 30 people and found that, quote, there was insufficient evidence that McManus violated the league's personal conduct policy, end quote. However, Tony Busby, the plaintiff's lawyer, who you might remember also represented the plaintiffs during the Deshaun Watson case, stated, quote, "The NFL hasn't yet spoken with our clients, so I'm a bit confused as to why anyone could conclude that at this point," end quote. So the NFL conducted an investigation and interviewed 30 people, but apparently did not interview the plaintiffs, which obviously seems problematic because why would you not interview the people that are accusing this person? It seems like their point of view would be very important. However, in an article published by Matt Schneidman of The Athletic, which was published on Wednesday, just a couple of days ago, the NFL says that they, quote, "reached out multiple times to the accuser's representation to request a meeting with the women, but never heard back," end quote. So, take what you will from the NFL. I don't necessarily think they're the most trustworthy of organizations, seeing as they're not unbiased in this scenario. But they claim that they tried to reach out to the plaintiffs, but were not able to get an interview. Brett Galloway, McManus's attorney, also in this, in this article published by Matt Schneidman, stated that the case has been resolved, quote. When asked if the case was dropped or settled, he again said it was, quote, resolved. So, you be the judge of that. That kind of, to me at least, this is editorializing, but makes it seem like it was settled in some sort. Brian Gutekunst, also in that article from Matt Schneidman, had a couple quotes, but he said that after speaking with the league about the investigation, that they felt, quote, "very good about their investigation and what they got out of it to make us comfortable at this point," end quote. So that's kind of a timeline of the events. He was accused of sexual misconduct during this flight while he was with the Jaguars. He was released by the Commanders. The NFL did an investigation. The NFL found that there were no evidence of wrongdoing in their opinion. The case was resolved. We don't know exactly how it was resolved. Brian Gutekunst said they were comfortable with the investigation, and McManus is now the kicker of the Packers. That it doesn't feel it feels kind of gross, honestly. I'm not a big fan of this move, obviously. I'm all for innocent until proven guilty, but, you'd just rather not have to deal with it in these situations. I think it's more important to have good people on the team than good players. And it's just, I guess it ultimately comes down to, like, do you trust the league? I don't really trust the NFL.
Not the league.
I don't trust the NFL at all. They clearly have a bias towards, not making themselves look bad. And then the follow-up question is, do you trust the Packers? And my answer to that is I would like to, but I just don't know that I do. And so obviously not a great situation. You'd wish that these kind of talking points were not around the Packers, but they are now. And I think it's important to have, everyone as informed as possible about what the allegations specifically are, because I think it is always important to hear the stories of these accusers and of these women and not try and just hide behind platitudes and, couched rhetoric.
Yeah. As you said, I also wrote that the whole thing feels kind of gross to have this associated with the Packers. And one of the things especially that bothered me about this was that for that same article by Michael DeRocco, there was, it wasn't quoted directly, but what Galloway, the lawyer, said. Basically, he went to assassinate the character of the two accusers, the two women.
Yeah, the lawyer said some stuff that was.
This just seems like the classic thing you hear where they're like blaming the victims and calling them out for being, something bad about them.
Yeah,
instead.
essentially, he took no time to actually
assassination of the accusers.
Yeah,
instead of arguing the merits of his case, he went straight after them instead of saying, so that made it even worse.
Yeah,
in my opinion.
And obviously, when a lawyer's first approach is to attack the character of these women, this is why more women don't come forward. Is because when they do, they're aspersions are cast on their character. They're called things that they are not. They're accused of things that they didn't do, and, that's, I think the rhetoric from the lawyer in this case was, pretty terrible. I mean, it was not like about the merit of the case at all. Like you said, it was just about a character assassination on these two women, which is, but yeah, this whole thing feels pretty gross. Like I said, I'm all for innocent until proven guilty, but it all feels pretty gross. But those are the off the field things with McManus. He said he's just trying to move forward, and he has denied the accusations, but it all feels kind of gross. But
yeah, and so it all comes down about whether you trust the Packers or not, because I don't think anybody should trust the NFL, because they have shown their colors.
Yeah,
over and over again.
Yeah,
about what
they are about protecting. The NFL is about protecting their image and protecting the league's image, and they don't care if Yeah, we know the NFL is not trustworthy. Like you said, it comes down to if you trust the Packers. And like I said, I would like to, but I don't know if I do. But moving on to McManus on the field, which is obviously there's no good way to do this transition, but it is probably something to just, we should talk about next, is what kind of kicker he is on the field. In 2023, he played with the Jaguars. He was 100% on extra points, 100% on kicks inside the 40, 11 of 13 from the 40 to 50 yard line, which was 14th of 34 quarterbacks in the NFL. 5 of 10
kickers.
Kickers. 5 of 10 from 50 plus, which was 26th of 34 amongst kickers, and a long of 56 yards. I didn't look at any of his his career stats because most of his time was spent kicking for Denver, which at altitude kind of skews a lot of these numbers. But so as a kicker on the field, he just provides more consistency from within 50 yards, I think is the big thing here. Yeah, but, so there's that.
Yeah. So, I guess move on to the things that are
things that are
about
less
the team in the game.
Yeah, things that are less
gross,
unpleasant to talk about. But yeah, so let's move on though, Dad, to the injury report for this game. And let's start off with the Packers. We have the injury report as of Thursday, the practice report as of Thursday. For the Packers, only one player not participating in practice, and that is Devontae Wyatt. They did have a number of players who were limited though. Elton Jenkins was limited on Thursday after being a DNP Wednesday with a knee injury. Colby Wooden was limited Thursday after being a DNP with a knee injury Wednesday. Dontavian Wicks has been limited both days after being knocked out of last Sunday's game with a shoulder injury. LaFleur said that they dodged a bullet on that one, so that's at least some good news. Josh Myers with a neck injury after having to leave the game briefly last weekend has been limited both days, so that's good to see him back at practice. Jaden Reed, after having to leave the game briefly last weekend, has been limited both days with an ankle injury, so good to see him back out there. Jair's been limited with a groin. He missed previous games with this same injury, but it sounds like just maybe some maintenance there. And then Kenny Clark with a toe, Tucker Kraft with a groin, and Christian Watson with an ankle were all limited as well. Dad, any thoughts on this side of the injury report for Green Bay?
Yeah, and I think we also saw that why it looked like on Friday, though the report's not out yet, official, looked like the only one who wasn't participating in practice today. I would say if Elton's is worrying me a little bit, though he's taken time off other weeks. Wicks might be back this week, which I did not expect at all. Yeah, I think some players who are missing time for the same injury this week as they did last week, but played, I think we are probably going to be, okay with them playing. If they were able to play last week on the same injury, just getting some extra rest during the week, I think.
Exactly. And, it seems like, the Packers are generally pretty cautious with these injuries, so giving them some time. Moving on to the Texans side of the injury report, though, Dad, they are really banged up so far. We haven't seen the Friday practice report yet, so it's possible some of these DNPs are making it back. But so far for them, obviously, the big one is Nico Collins is still on IR for them. He is their star receiver. This man is Terrell Owens reincarnated for all I care. Like this, he is an absolute freak in nature. So it will be at least, a little easier for the Packers not having to go against him this weekend. They're also their defensive tackle, Mario Edwards Jr., who's having a good year so far this year, was just suspended for PEDs. So maybe that had something to do with why he was having a good year so far this year. But, as one player goes out the door, another one comes back in. Danico Autry, who was suspended initially for the beginning of the season for PEDs, is coming back. So they kind of get a bit of a one-for-one swap right there. In terms of who is practicing this week, though, for them, or specifically who is not practicing for them so far this week, the DNPs so far have been Azeez Al-Shaair, who has not practiced with a knee injury. He's one of their starting linebackers. Their other starting linebacker, Henry To'o, has not practiced because of a concussion, so two of their starting linebackers might miss this game. Their starting defensive tackle, Folorunso Fatukasi, with a shoulder injury, is also not practicing. Kamari Lassiter, their starting outside corner 2, is not practicing with a shoulder injury as well. Jimmy Ward, their starting safety, with a groin injury, is also not practicing. And then Robert Woods with a foot injury, one of their receivers, is also not practicing. And then in terms of limited participation, Joe Mixon with an ankle. He missed a few games with this ankle previously, but he played last week. I think they're probably just managing that. And then Delshon Phillips with a hip injury is also limited. Dad, long injury report for the Texans, specifically on the defensive side of the ball, specifically in the spine of that defense. I mean, D-tackle, 2 starting linebackers, and a starting safety. That middle of the field is really getting hit hard.
Yeah, and I think I've already heard that, say, Ward and Lassiter are not expected to play. And the others, Toto with a concussion, you never know. But by this point, it might be getting unlikely. So they could be missing a lot on the defensive side, but in addition to their number one wide receiver being out for 4 weeks on IR.
Exactly, and this is definitely going to make things easier for the Packers, but it's not going to be it's not going to make things absolutely easy. This is still a very good Texans team. But Dad, anything else in the injury report you wanted to touch on, or shall we move on to the actual meat of the game preview?
Let's move on to the meat of the game.
Okay, the meat of the game preview. Let's start off with just some quick facts. This game is in Lambeau, noon Lambeau time. It's supposed to be 77 degrees and sunny with some wind. The Packers are 2.5-point favorites with an over/under of 47.5 for an implied score of around 25-23. The Packers will be wearing their fun new all-white uniforms, the white helmet. I don't personally love them, but I think they could be a fun change-up. They're only wearing them once, so we'll see how they look on TV. These uniforms always look different in the promo materials than they actually do like in game time. I think it would have been cooler for like a night game, actually in wintertime, but can't have everything. But Dad, that's kind of just some quick hitters from the game. What's been going on with the Texans so far this year, though?
So they're 5-1 in the year, in first place in the AFC South and the second seed in the AFC behind Kansas City. So far, they've beat Jacksonville, Chicago, and Buffalo at home, and the Colts and the Patriots on the road, with their only loss coming to the Vikings on the road. So they've been, mostly taking care of business. So that they did lose by a decent chunk to the Vikings. I think it was like 35 to in the 30s to single digits.
Yeah, it was 35-7 if I remember correctly. It was a tough game for the Texans in that one, but other than that game, they've looked really good. We're not really good. They've looked good.
I'm hoping they have a significant weakness to the NFC North.
Yes, it's clearly an NFC North related issue. No, that's right. There's some kind of juju there. The one game of sample size really
in the North.
That's true.
On the road in the North.
Yes, it's clearly a travel thing. That's clearly the reason. Yes,
clearly it's just the latitude is too high. Even though they were indoors for one, it still affected them.
Exactly. But yeah, no, the Texans are a good team. 5-1. Us leading in their division. They've had a solid season so far.
Yeah, of course, there are some aspects of that division that you.
Yeah, but hey, 2 of our 4 wins have come against that division, yes, so we can't we can't talk too much.
And they haven't even played the Titans or the Colts yet.
Exactly.
Oh no, sorry, they did the Colts on the road, but not at home. Sorry, but not the Titans yet. So on traditional statistics, they're always per drive, and I have not yet done this percentage of yards you need.
Okay, all right.
Drive. I'm going to do that at some point.
Okay, whatever you say, buddy.
But the Texans are 8th in the league in yards per drive. Green Bay's 10th, and 17th in points per drive. Green Bay's at 10th in that as well. And on defense, the Texans are 14th in yards per drive to Green Bay's 9th in yards per drive, and 14th in points per drive to Green Bay's 10th. So Green Bay's a bit better than them on both aspects of defense on a per drive basis. And then by DVOA, so taking into account opponents, they are 17th on offense by DVOA, 14th in passing, and 24th in rushing DVOA. To Green Bay's 5th on offense, 5th in passing, and 7th in rushing. So Green Bay's been able to, do well in both aspects on a, strength of schedule adjusted basis. On defense, the Texans, however, this is where the DVOA shows a little differently. They're 2nd in defense by DVOA. 6th against the pass and 3rd against the run, compared to Green Bay at 15th, 14th against the pass, and 13th against the run. So some of the raw numbers where the Texans look like they're not doing so well in some defensive metrics may be because of the strength of schedule.
Yeah.
And in special teams, Houston is 7th by DVOA and Green Bay is 26th.
It's the kicking. It's the kicking has really sunk the Green Bay special teams. Actually, I would say I just wanted to touch on really quick. I've been as harsh on Rich Bisaccia as probably anyone that I know. I would say outside of the kicking game, the rest of the special teams has been pretty good.
Yeah, they're in the top 10 in punting. Punt returns are a little low because they just haven't had very many. and I think the kicking and the kickoff are also kind of similar. They're doing okay. Now I also did a whole snap share weighted PFF grade for all the players and all the position groups.
Yeah, which I think we talked about. It was useful to do because the Texans' defense is quite good so far this year, but they might be missing up to 5 starters. So half of their starting unit might just be out. So I think it is an interesting, exercise to do, looking at like, okay, how much might this change their defense with some of these backups coming in?
Right. So some players like, Nico Collins obviously could leave out, Edwards can leave out, and Ward and Lassiter I could leave out of their kind of grade going into this game. Now, other ones like To'o and Fatukasi are still up in the air, so I left them in. But overall, this is giving a snap share weighted PFF grade. So basically, take the players' snap share within the position group times their PFF grade, and then summing that up for a weighted average PFF grade per position. So at offense, the Texans and the Packers are essentially tied, within like less than a point of each other. But on defense, the Packers have are much better grade overall on the defensive players, built primarily on the safety group, which is like miles better for the Packers.
The Packers safety group,
they have the number 1 and number 2 safeties on the year.
Yeah, the Packers safeties are a lot of fun to watch right now. All 3 of them.
Yeah, and then and also the D line is much better graded for the Packers than the Texans, and the corner room as well. Which
is surprising, but part of that is probably, they're dealing with backups. What's really keeping that Texans D-line group, going crazy is those edges, but yeah, they're playing really well.
So their edge group is a decent chunk ahead of the
yeah. I mean, that's what happens when, you're the Texans and you lead the league in pressures, but we're already getting to kind of talking some good things about the Texans now. We're leaking into hey, now play nice. So I'll stop chiming in about all the good things that the Texans are doing so far this year and let you have at it.
Yeah, so I've got a few things of actually good things about their defense. So as you mentioned, they have 2 really good starting edge players in second
Will
year
Anderson and Danielle Hunter.
Willie Anderson and longtime Packer foe Danielle Hunter.
Yeah, you might remember him. Played him once or twice. He's been around the block. Yeah, he's with the Vikings for a long time before this, and moved to the Texans this offseason, and has been really good for them so far this year.
Yeah, and you might have forgotten, like with all the attention to Stroud, but Anderson was the defensive rookie of the year last year with 7 sacks. This year, both Hunter and Anderson have an above 80 PFF grade. It's like borderline elite. And among edge rushers, Anderson is 6th in total pressures, and Hunter is 11th in the league out of 115 qualifying edges. And they are 24th and 9th, respectively, in win percentage per PFF.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So that's one aspect about their defense that's been really good. Another is by DVOA, according to FTN Fantasy, they're actually really good at defending tight ends and running backs as pass catchers. Their DVO grade is they're 1st in the league against tight ends and 5th in the league against running backs as pass catchers. And also apparently from NFL Pro, really good at defending slot receivers.
Yeah, I mean their defense is interesting because they're really, what they're built on is that D-line getting after the passer, and that's and being aggressive getting upfield. Like that's what their defense is great at. And part of that is, also D'Amico Ryans is a fantastic defensive mind. And, I know he's going to be missing a lot of pieces this weekend, but we've seen on the other side of the ball with Matt LaFleur, like these great coaches, sometimes they like the challenge. Sometimes they like really just messing things around and throwing really funky looks at you when they're, playing with one hand tied behind their back. So I think that's going to be something interesting to watch to see if D'Amico can do that this week. For me, one thing
I want to add to that is they also seem to be more than the sum of their parts, which could also, attribute to coaching.
Yeah. And I do want to, mention, they have, Will Anderson and Danielle Hunter on the edges. They also have an awesome corner one in Derek Stingley. He's a really good shutdown corner. So they have a couple of stars, I would say, and then the rest of the pieces are good complementary players, I would say.
Yeah, I could talk about this. I have something about that coverage from one corner as well. But once you get on with, what you think, Dave, how are you going to play nice?
just wanted to shout out CJ Stroud. He's really, really, really good. And the numbers don't do it justice. He's only 12th in EPA per dropback. He's 11th in completion percentage over expectation, 13th in yards per attempt. I think a lot of that doesn't do justice to how good he's really been this year. Like, he's been a borderline like top 5, top 4 quarterback so far this year, and the numbers don't really bear that out. Mostly because, and we'll talk about that in a little bit, the surrounding ecosystem around him has probably not been as good as you think it's been. We'll talk about that shortly. I think he's been put in a lot of, really tough situations that he's had to thrive in. He's been really good under pressure so far this year. When pressured, he's been 7th in EPA per dropback, 9th in completion percentage over expectation, and 5th in yards per attempt. So it really doesn't, when you pressure him, he's just really good at standing in that pocket and just delivering a perfect spiral as he's getting crushed anyways. I mean, I think I was hearing, Nate Tice, and I can't remember who it was of Yahoo. They were talking about, like, it really doesn't matter. Every single time he throws it, it's a perfect spiral. And it's really just kind of jarring how every time the ball leaves his hand, it's just the most tight spiral you've ever seen in your life. And that is it. CJ Stroud's a really fun quarterback to watch. And I just wanted to shout him out here as, something that is a highlight of the Texans. But that kind of does add on to, something, I'm a little bit nervous about him carving us up a little bit. And that does kind of move us on to our next section, Dad, which is what are you nervous about in this matchup in terms of ways that the Texans do things that maybe might make things specifically difficult for the Packers?
Yeah, so I'm going to go to a bugaboo we've had for a couple years now, and that's abilities to convert on short yardage runs, including scoring TDs in the short red zone. So on defense per FTN Fantasy, they have the 5th best adjusted line yards against the run and are 3rd best in power success against. So that's success in short yardage situations specifically. And 7th best in stuff percentage, which is runs for no gain or loss. While Green Bay is only 16th best in power success on offense and only 18th best in stuff percentage on offense, on the offensive line. So this, I think, shows up a little bit in the red zone scoring, where Green Bay is only 20th in percent of red zone trips with a touchdown on offense. And the Texans only have given up only the 9th fewest rushing touchdowns per game. So this is something where, and I look at this and I'm like, then how are their D tackles graded so poorly? But this is actually something they're really good at.
Yeah. Yeah, I know, right?
So this is, again, it's like, I look at the individual players and it doesn't seem like the defense should be this good, but it is.
It's D'Amico Ryan's a really good D coordinator. I mean, the last time the Packers, I think, met up with D'Amico Ryan's was that 2021 playoff game when he was the defensive coordinator of the Niners.
2021.
Yeah, 2021 season, 2022 year, where D'Amico Ryans was the defensive coordinator of the Niners, and they put the absolute clamps on the Packers offense in that game. The Packers could not move the ball. After the first 2 drives. After the first 2 drives, the Packers just got stuck in the mud and could not move the ball at all. And that's just
right
a
after
testament
that was Mercedes Lewis fumble. When
Yep.
we should have gone up
Fell
by
apart.
2 touchdowns, then the offense just couldn't do anything anymore after that.
Yeah, I mean, part of that is how talented that the 49ers defense was, but also part of that is D'Amico Ryans just putting them in really good positions. And the other thing that
the Niners defense has not been quite as good
since he part of that is,
yes.
Yeah, part of that is personnel as well. This over time, it's hard to pay everyone. The thing that I'm nervous about, though, is also, their defense, and it's their pass rush and their blitzing. Like we mentioned, Danielle Hunter and Will Anderson, probably the best edge duo in the league, I would say. I don't know if that's a hot take or not, but probably the best duo in the league. They have as a team, the highest pressure rate in the league. And, to some extent that can be mitigated by what Jordan Love has done when pressured so far this year. He's 14th in EPA per dropback when pressured, which is, averaged. I am a little bit concerned about what happens when they blitz, though. They have the 8th highest blitz rate in the league. And Jordan Love, so far has been blitzed at the 3rd highest rate in the league. So, that's something that the Texans are going to do and going to try a lot of. And so far this season, Love has struggled against the blitz. He is 30th of 31 quarterbacks in EPA per dropback when blitzed. And the question is how much of that is maybe due to, some limited mobility that he's had after having that injury week 1 against the Eagles. Because last year he was 6th in EPA per dropback against the blitz. So the question is that going to, revert back to, maybe leveling off closer to what we saw last year? We know the Texans are going to try and figure out which of the ones it is because, they blitz a lot. Love has been blitzed a lot. I think that's something we're going to see a lot in this game. And the question is, can Love be better against the blitz than he has been so far this year?
I sure hope so. I'm hoping it was just, a little bit of a small sample size and a little bit of the knee injury limiting his mobility for a couple games, and he'll get back to playing last year. I'm sure the Texans are hoping otherwise.
Exactly. Yeah, I think the Texans are gonna, hit that button and at least make him prove that he is gonna do well against the blitz. But that is something that
absolutely, because from a coach perspective, it's almost like malpractice not to check it.
Yeah, exactly. And we know DeMeco Ryans a good coach, so he's definitely going to try that out. So that's something to keep an eye on. But Dad, so those are the things we're nervous about. But, the Packers aren't totally helpless in this game. The Texans have their weaknesses as well. What are some exploitable weaknesses that the Texans might have that the Packers can try and poke at?
So you mentioned their number one corner, Stingley?
Yeah,
right?
Derek Stingley Jr. specifically.
So, however, by DVOA, they are 23rd in defending wide receiver twos.
Mm-hmm. And their second corner is not going to play in this game.
And their second corner, Lassiter, is almost certainly going to miss the game. I think he didn't practice today. There's a little bit of, you can see who practiced today or not. And I think the only one who is back is Fatukasi.
Mm-hmm.
But they are, however, first in the league in defending the left side of the field.
Yeah.
And so I think we know where Stingley is lining up.
I wonder if they have him travel at all with probably not in this matchup.
It
we
seems
don't really
like
have a
based
guy
on the splits, but they are 20th in defending the right side of the field. So that doesn't seem like he travels based on how different the left and right side of the field are in the success rate against the Texas defense. So this could be a good day for Wicks, Watson, or Dobbs if Wicks plays, depending on which one you think is their wide receiver two from day to day or play to play.
Mm-hmm. It's a mystery, and that's actually part of what I think is fun about this Packers offense is the ability to spread the ball around, and I think that lends itself because when you have a wide receiver one only and then just kind of mediocre receivers around him, would be a tougher matchup because you are playing against a team with a solidified corner one. You're playing against a defensive coordinator who is willing to game plan to take away your best weapon. But when you have, weapons like the Packers do, where you don't necessarily have any guy who's, number one take over a game type of player, but you do have a lot of players who can punish, below average corners, which is what you'd like to see in a matchup like this specifically.
Yeah, so they're set up to take advantage of wherever the weakness is.
Exactly.
And they don't mind feeding any one of them.
Yeah, exactly. And it's just such a fun offense to watch right now, which I really enjoy. For me, though, I think the weakness that I'm looking at for them is on the other side. Because, we talked about how, and I kind of hinted at this briefly, we talked about how their offense and CJ Stroud specifically is playing really well, but the numbers don't really show it. And I mentioned how, I was going to get around to talking about how the surrounding ecosystem around him has not been great. They've been really struggling on first and second down and getting him stuck in a lot of third and longs. And to his credit, he's been really good on these third and longs because he's fantastic. He's the fourth best in as a team, they're fourth best in EPA per play on third and long just because of how dynamic Stroud is, and that's defined as 3rd and 7 or longer. But on first and second down, they've really been struggling. They're 25th in the league in success rate on first down. They're 30th in success rate on second down. And those numbers are per RBSDM. So they're getting stuck in a lot of third and, not great. They're getting behind the sticks. And, some of that could be due to the fact that they were missing Joe Mixon for several weeks as their starting running back. Their running game does not look the same without him. It is actually a really poor running game when he's not playing well. And so you could argue a lot of that is due to him missing time. But even last week with, having him back against what is a solid Patriots defense, but not an elite Patriots defense, they were still only 22nd in success rate on first down. So that wasn't something where, they're gonna give you opportunities to have, situations where they have to drop back and you're going to be able to rush the passer. And just to pile onto that, their pass blocking actually hasn't been very great this year. They're allowing the 8th highest pressure rate in the league with the 3rd fastest time to pressure. So they're allowing pressure and quick pressure. So that's not great for them. And their left tackle, Laramie Tunsil, who is, a great player and has been a great player for a while, is having a bit of a down year. He's the 4th most penalized offensive lineman in the whole league. And then their left guard, Kenyon Green, is the 8th most penalized offensive lineman in the whole league. So they're struggling with penalties. They're giving up pressure. They're giving up quick pressure. And part of that, maybe is a bit of a chicken and the egg because they're in third and long so much. They're, in situations where the other team is rushing the passer and is able to pin their ears back. And so maybe that's making some of those pass protection numbers rather look a little bit worse. But they are a team that struggles on first and second down, gets into, obvious passing situations where they have to really drop back and have struggled to protect the passer. So I think there is an avenue to winning there. And obviously CJ Stroud is so good that he can overcome a lot of that and has so far, and that's why they're 5-1. But that is, I think, a weakness and kind of a weakness that compounds on itself there for the Texans.
Yeah, and I was trying to look up a little bit of their success rate running in the beginning of the year, say weeks 1 and 2. And when Mixon would have been, not only playing but healthy. And that wasn't so great either.
Mm-hmm. Exactly, yeah. It's really just been a bit of a, it was kind of similar. It's not quite as bad. Last year, they really, it was one of the, worst running games in the league last year on early downs for them. And that's part of the reason they brought in Joe Mixon this offseason. And it's been better, but it's still been, I would say, a decided weakness of them. But speaking of weaknesses that the Texans might have, that kind of leads us into how we might think or how we hope the Packers might approach this game. And Dad, what are some things that you hope the Packers do to maybe take advantage of some Texans weaknesses? Maybe, get a leg up there. What are you hoping the Packers do in terms of approach in this game?
Yeah, so I was thinking a little bit about where the weaknesses in their pass coverage is. So I'd like to see the Packers run some routes out of bunch formations with patterns crossing the middle to the deep middle. So despite being good defending, say, tight ends by DVOA, according to as a target, the Texans are 28th in EPA per pass against tight targets rather than wide targets. And per FTN Fantasy, they are 21st in defending the middle of the field. So with this in mind, with backups playing at cornerback too, and at safety with Ward also looking to miss the game, the Texans' coverage could be vulnerable to complicated coverage calls in the middle as players are crossing and starting in a bunch formation. They are also 4th worst in defending receivers in the deep middle of the field. They are, however, 1st in defending the deep left, so I think we know where Stingley is. So that places where they seem to be vulnerable in the field for coverage. So to attack those middle and deep middle of the field, specifically with complicated route formations that they may misdiagnose with backups playing.
Yeah, and especially with backups playing, I just wanted to touch on that as well. A lot of these numbers, might be different with new players playing. Could be better. Probably. Be better. I was gonna say could be better. Probably gonna be worse. I was gonna say somehow the backups are just better.
I'm hoping that the Texans coaching staff has chosen the right players in the past.
Yeah,
rather than have guys on the bench who are better. Who will now play. We
don't have an Evan Williams situation where it's like, oh. Well, it's the classic.
Why was this guy on the bench?
Well, it's the classic, Infinity War meme where it's like, what was she doing up there when Scarlet Witch comes down and just blows up 3 machines, and Okoye is like, what was she doing up there?
The Battle of Wakanda.
Exactly. Why was she up there this? That's what I say. Yeah. Why was she up there this whole time? Why was she not down here kicking butt? That's kind of how I felt watching Evan Williams take all those snaps the last 2 weeks. It's like, what was he doing on the bench? Let's get this guy in the field every single play. The thing that I'm keeping an eye on that I hope the Packers do, though, is running a lot of play action. And it's not just because they have backup linebackers in. The Texans' normal pass defense is quite good. They have the 5th lowest EPA per dropback allowed and the 4th fewest yards per dropback allowed. But when teams run play action against them, that drops all the way down to 18th in EPA per dropback and 24th in yards per dropback. So you can get after them with play action, and part of that's just how aggressive their linebackers are. And with backup linebackers, you could probably confuse them even more doing that. And the Packers are really good at play action. They run it at the 13th highest rate, so they do it a good amount. And they're 4th in the league in EPA per dropback and 6th in yards per play with play action. So the Packers are good at it. The Texans are bad at defending it. They're going to have backups at linebacker who you would assume are even worse at defending it. And so I think that's somewhere that the Packers can really get after the Texans defense.
Yeah, I think we should test their backups early and often, put them in conflict, and take advantage.
Yeah, easier said than done, but, I think play action.
And Love doesn't mind throwing over the middle of the field.
Exactly.
And to go on play action. I think now he's starting to go more under center.
Yeah, we talked about that.
First week back.
Mm-hmm, we talked about that. It's been more under center the past few weeks. Just each week it's been getting more so, I think, probably as Love feels a little bit more comfortable dropping back from under center. But Dad, I guess let's move on to our next section, which is don't take your eye off of that guy. These are players that we think need to have a good game essentially for the Packers to win, or players that, their performance, pretty much decides either way which way the game is going to go. Dad, who did you have in this one?
So I kind of paired up because I want to look at the interior defensive line for the Packers. So I've got Brooks and Kenny Clark. They lead the team in pressures over the last 3 weeks with Wyatt out. And Kenyon Green at guard for the Texans is their worst pass blocker. So once again, I am calling for pressure up the middle in this game.
Yeah, and I'll take pressure anywhere I can get. Honestly, is the big thing. I don't up the middle from the edges, blitzes. I don't, as long as we can get some kind of pressure. And the thing is, Stroud is so good under pressure, maybe it won't even matter. But as long as we can get it from somewhere, I will appreciate it. For me, the player I'm watching in this game is Rasheed Walker. I think both him and Tom are going to have their hands full. But I just have a little bit more confidence in Tom with how he's played so far this year. Walker's played fine, but I would say he's like an above average tackle as opposed to like a really good tackle. He's going to be having quite the matchup on his hands. Will Anderson lines up on the right side 60% of the time for them, and Hunter lines up there about 30% of the time. So he's going to mostly be dealing with Anderson, but Hunter as well. And like we mentioned before, they're really good. You mentioned some pressure rates or some win rates by PFF. I have just their pressure rates from NFL Pro. They rank 10th and 2nd respectively in pressure rate. That's Anderson 10th and Danielle Hunter 2nd in pressure rate in the NFL per NFL Pro. So they're going to get after the passer. And I think Rasheed Walker is the guy that I think is going to have to hold it down on that blind side for Green Bay if they're going to want to be able to do some drop back passing stuff and, have longer developing plays.
Yeah. So at least his PFF pass blocking grade is over 80. So both of the Packers tackles are over 80 in pass blocking grade. For the season, it's really his run blocking grade that's dragged down his overall grade rather than his pass blocking. So hopefully the Packers tackles can hold up.
Yeah. And they're going to need to for the Packers to win this game because that's where, the Texans really make their hay. Is that a saying? Make their hay?
Yeah.
Make their hay on defense.
If I don't remember it properly, we'll just say it's a saying.
I was going to say anything's a saying if you exactly.
Stop trying to make fetch happen.
It's not
going to be a saying.
Happen. Yeah.
Streets ahead.
Streets ahead is verbal wildfire. But no, yeah. So those are the things that I think are going to be a deciding factor is how these tackles play against these edge rushers, because that's what the Texans kind of base their whole defense around, is having these two elite edge guys. And if you can, hopefully you can't stop them, but if you can slow them down a little bit, I think that can help the Packers get after them. But Dad, let's move on to overtime. These are just some things that we had loosely that didn't really fit any of the previous buckets, but that we still wanted to talk about. Dad, what do you want to talk about in this one?
So the Packers running backs have been really good this year. Both Josh Jacobs and Emmanuel Wilson are in the top 12 in running back PFF grade on the year.
And Chris Brooks hasn't been bad either when he's played a couple handfuls.
The time he got in the last game.
He looks solid.
And they're both the top 20 in rush yards over expected, according to NFL Pro, out of 50. So it's out of like 57 running backs. So they're both playing well on the year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and
exactly.
And the Packers' overall run game, because of that, even if their run blocking grades have not been that great, their overall run production and run game has been good.
Yeah, and that kind of leads into something I want to talk about, which is the Texans' run defense, which has actually been quite good. 11th in success rate allowed, 11th in EPA per carry allowed. Those are per RBSDM. But with both starting linebackers might be out, their starting D tackle could be out. I guess he's going to be questionable for this game, it sounds like. And their other starting defensive tackle was suspended, although they are getting Danico Autry back. This defensive run defense might look totally different than it's looked so far this year. And I think that's somewhere the Packers should look to attack with some, misdirection. I think we're going to see some, runs to Bo Melton and Jaden Reed in this game, because that's actually how the Packers have been getting a lot of their explosive runs, is these runs to the receivers. But so I think that's somewhere the Packers are going to look to attack, is those linebackers specifically that are coming in as backups probably, and hitting them with a lot of misdirection in the run game, I think could be a good place to start for Green Bay. And that's just something I wanted to touch on is, yes, the Texans run defense has been good, but they're going to have a lot of backups. And obviously we talked about already, D'Amico Ryans is a fantastic defensive mind. So maybe he's able to coach up these guys and just make it easier for them. But that's something I think the Packers should try and test early. Dad, any other overtime things you wanted to touch on though, or should we move on to wrapping things up here with the bottom line?
Let's move on to the bottom line.
Okay, bottom line, Dad, the Texans win if blank.
The Packers can't stop the Texans' run game on early downs. Mm-hmm. They basically giving them short down distance and can't get off the field.
Yep, I think that's definitely a fantastic one. For me, I had the Texans win if the Packers can't block up the pass rush and blitzes. If the Texans can really, get after Jordan Love with blitzes and with the pass rush and force Green Bay into mistakes, force Green Bay into, having to punt, I think that's the scenario where, that will make things tough for Green Bay. But conversely, Dad, Packers win if blank.
Conversely, I have the exact reflection of yours, is that the Packers win if the pass protection holds up against the Texans' edge rushers.
I just want to
I
note,
don't
folks,
think they're going to get much pass rush up the middle.
I just want to note, I put mine in first. He just copied mine. I had mine in there before he did in the doc, so there's that. I have the Packers win if they can run the ball to stay in favorable down and distance and further enable play action. If the Packers can run the ball and not get into third and longs and let, Will Anderson and Danielle Hunter and whoever they have blitzing, get these situations where they can really pin their ears back and rush the passer. If they can stay ahead of the sticks, I think that kind of mitigates some of the pass rush from the Texans. And, if you can take away that elite part of the Texans defense, or at least make that part less impactful, I think that leads to a Packers win. But Dad, wrapping things up here, score prediction, what do you got?
So I think there's going to be a decent amount of scoring in this game. So I have the Packers winning 31-24.
Nice. I've got the Packers also winning 24-21, though. I think it's going to be a little bit closer. I think part of these game might be a little clunky at times. I don't know why I'm feeling a clunky game going forward, so I guess we'll see. But Dad, that kind of wraps things up here for our preview for Week 7, Packers versus Texans, Love versus Stroud. A little bit of a, downer that this isn't a primetime game, because I think this would have been a really awesome, night game.
Instead of the Jets
Steelers. Ugh. Goodness. But at least we get to see, first game of Devontae Adams. So at least that'll be kind of a fun side story in that game. But anyway.
They won't hammer that into the ground.
Oh, no. That won't have a million graphics and a million different highlight packages. And yeah, no, definitely not. But anyway, thank you so much for listening. This has been our preview of the Packers-Texans upcoming game. Make sure to check out, we'll be doing a post game for this game next week, so make sure to check that out. Once again, please subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube. We would really appreciate it. Leave a review, leave a comment. We love talking with other Packers fans. Follow us on Twitter at FatherSonPacker. We tweet out whenever we have new episodes. Updates on Packers news, whether that's roster moves, injury reports, etc., etc. Content from other Packers content creators that we enjoy. One-stop shop and everything. Titletown. Thank you again so much for listening, though. And until next time, go Pack Go.
Go Pack Go.